Let's start with recruiting. Of course, camps are in full session. We've got official visits taking place. Really, end of May into June is just crucial time for these programs, and people might really cast the spotlight on Billy Napier and his future at Florida, resting on some of this as well. So, where do we stand in recruiting? Who are some of the hot targets that people are talking about?
Yeah, Mark, we should probably start with late Monday, Josiah Abdullah, 3-star wide receiver, decommitted from Florida, and kind of a mutual parting of ways here. And you could kind of tell, Florida had hosted 2 other wide receivers this past weekend, got some big names, got some legacies that are be coming on campus the next couple of weeks as well. We kind of got word over the weekend that this was probably going to happen, and it happened late on Monday. So he was he was around, the 500 overall mark for overall player in the class of 2025. So recent decommit there. So, but, Florida is going to have to rebound with that. And of course, Mark, I know you cover Ohio State pretty close, but one of the bigger targets is a Gator legacy who was on Ohio State's campus this past week was Vernell Brown III. Of course, his grandfather played for the Gators, so it's been a long legacy there for Florida. He's certainly near the top of the board for Florida, one of the best yards after the catch receivers there in the country. But also, go back to this past weekend, and Florida did some good work with Joshua Moore and Deshaun Montgomery, both on campus this past week, both 4-star receivers from the state of Florida. So it does look like Florida will turn its attention more to state of Florida prospects at the wide receiver spot. And of course, why wouldn't you when you see what the state of Florida has produced at the wide receiver spot? So of course, DJ Lagway waiting in the wings after this season. So I think that's a big selling point. That was a big selling point for these receivers, Moore and Montgomery this past weekend. But if you want to keep going down the list, Florida is going to go after some big names. Caleb Cunningham from the state of Mississippi, he's going to be visiting this weekend. I don't necessarily see that one working out for Florida in the end, but I did mention Vernell Brown III. He's going to visit June 14th, and that's a loaded weekend for Florida because Dallas Wilson's also going to be on campus. The 5-star who's committed to Oregon right now out of Tampa. There's some talk, if he does flip, it might be a Florida-Miami battle if he does decide to flip from Oregon. So there are some big names the Gators are going after as well. But, one more from IMG, Donovan Olugbode. He's kind of he don't let a whole lot out, but maybe trending Florida just a bit. So that visit coming up in a couple of weeks will be big. But also another legacy, Mark, is C.J. Ingram, Cornelius Ingram, a former Gators tight end in the Urban Meyer era. His son, who plays quarterback at Hawthorne, is being recruited to play wide receiver for Florida. So Florida's got some big names and some legacies to help make up for that decommitment of that they just suffered on Monday.
You just mentioned Urban Meyer. Anybody else on the College Football Hall of Fame candidates list that was just released here in the last 24 hours from Gator Nation?
I know I saw it yesterday, but I was so busy with recruiting, I didn't even go back to look at it. I know Urban Meyer.
And it's not like the NFL. It's not like there's like 12 names. There's like 80 names. So, it is difficult to keep track of. So sorry to put you on the spot there.
Yeah.
But we know
I know Urban and Nick Saban were on there. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
They're the headliners. And when you look at that Urban Meyer record, tough to deny that. Obviously, he's a slam dunk as well as Nick Saban. 187-32 sticks in my brain from looking at that this morning. That's just crazy. And of course, won the 2 national championships at Florida. How does Gator Nation feel about Urban Meyer these days?
Well, it's probably been probably come back around a little bit, Mark, because of course the wins aren't there as they were under Urban Meyer. So a lot of people were like, "Hey, I missed those days," no matter what it looked like. But no, a lot of people think he deserves to be in the Ring of Honor that Florida, has there at the stadium. I think eventually he certainly will be placed in that. But they've come. I think most have come around. Of course, you go back to what happened, and he had the heart problems and then takes a year off. And look, I know people will say, "Oh, it was planned for him to go to Ohio State." I mean, look, he had no way of forecasting what was going to happen with Terrell Pryor and Jim Tressel at the time. He had no idea that was going to play out. And he took a year off and was back and came back to the year college. It came back to college football at Ohio State. But I know that rubs some people the wrong way. But all in all, I think enough time has passed for most of Gator Nation that there's still a soft spot for Urban Meyer and the 2 championships he was able to win at Florida.
Back to 2024, we are 5 weeks, 6 weeks away from SEC Media Days. And then once we hit that, we roll right into August camp. Position battles. Of course, those are going to be waged in August. Starting with day one, where are your eyes and ears going most of all?
I think, Mark, we should probably. I'd still call it a battle, but I think we kind of know how it will play out. Elijah Badger was the big transfer wide receiver Florida got from Arizona State at the tail end. It was just a couple of weeks ago. So big pickup for Florida, a big body receiver they really need to put on the outside there. Now, there is that little worry of a back injury that he suffered late last season, was very limited this spring as well. But Florida needed to go get a weapon like that to really help Trey Wilson. And look, Trey Wilson was going to put up numbers anyway, but now defenses just can't solely focus on him, solely focus on taking him away. A Badger can be a downfield threat, a run after the catch threat. So if he's downfield, that allows Trey Wilson to work underneath like we saw him do last year, but also just make it where defenses can't solely focus on him, double team him, bracket him. So they'll move him all over Billy Napier did say when he was here in Jacksonville a couple of weeks ago about Trey Wilson, we're going to wear him out. So they're going to give him the ball a lot. One of the best playmakers as a freshman last year for this Gator offense and in the country as a freshman. And then Elijah Badger coming in and really going to help around that. But you also got Chimere Dike, transfer from Wisconsin, who played with Graham Mertz a couple of years ago, put up a pretty good season a couple of years ago with Graham Mertz in that 2022 season. So 2 transfers to go along with Trey Wilson, but we'll see what the wide receivers who have already been in this roster hold. You got Khalil Jackson coming back. Marcus Burke is the name that for the last couple of springs has been, hey, this is going to be a breakout player. Once again, that's coming up. But then young guys, Andy Jean, Aiden Mizell, who was on this roster last year as well. So you're getting some transfers, I think, to bring in some proven production, but I still wouldn't overlook the guys that have been on this roster. So I think wide receiver, Mark, is certainly the place I'm going. And then offensive tackle. Florida suffered some injuries. Austin Barber, who played left tackle last year, right tackle the route before for the Gators. And then Cam Waits, where the guy who's been experienced. Florida brings in transfers, Devin Manuel from Arkansas, Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon from San Diego State. Well, kind of fortunate for them. Barber and Waits went down with injuries in the spring. So it was those transfers who got rep after rep after rep in spring. And I think that's really going to benefit Florida and really create a competition at the tackle spots when fall camp rolls around. So even though, the offense hasn't had as many questions as the defensive side of the ball, I still think there might be a little more questions of how it's going to turn out. I think defensive line, we kind of know how that's going to turn out for Florida. Linebacker, I think we kind of know that's how it's going to turn out. Safety, Florida brought in a ton of transfers at that spot as well, but I think we know right now it's going to be Asa Turner, Jordan Castell, DJ Douglas as your top 3 at the safety spots. So a little bit of a battle there. But while this defense overall has more questions, it's not necessarily, Mark, who will be the contributors. It's just how much will those contributors have an impact for that defense.
So if we stay on the transfer topic here, you mentioned a ton of them. Who would be most likely to be standout guys? We're talking to a lot of people here that are just catching up with Florida football, but they've got a marquee game, of course, week 1 against Miami. Who would be the guys that we would need to look out for as guys that could be impact players?
Elijah Badger. I don't want you to talk more about him, but wide receiver, I'm going him just because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. Mark, on defense, I got to go Pup Howard. He was the linebacker Florida probably should have got a couple years ago anyway, but spent a year at South Carolina, hits the transfer portal after 1 year at South Carolina from Jacksonville. It really hurt me. I got to know him a little bit as a recruit, know some people close to him as well. So personally, it stung a bit to see him to go to South Carolina, but now he's in Gainesville anyway and really should just step into a starting role right there alongside Shamar James. He got a ton of reps in spring because of some injuries, because of some transfers that away for Florida at that position, like Scooby Williams going to Texas A&M. So now I think Grayson Howard comes in right away and is an instant starter, impact player at the linebacker spot. I mentioned DJ Douglas at safety as well from Tulane. He was probably one of the more consistent players at the safety spot. Asa Turner brings a lot of experience from Washington in that defense that was in the national championship this past year. But also one kind of under the radar because of his name, but he was highly ranked in the transfer portal, Mark, was Joey Slackman, the defensive lineman from Penn. Really was a stat machine at that level. Now it's about, can it translate to the SEC? But he was one of the higher ranked defensive linemen, and Florida just needed more bodies there, but not just bodies, impactful bodies to go along with Caleb Banks, who played a good bit last year, Cam Jackson, who played a lot last year. Florida really added some depth through the transfer portal. Mark, I think Florida brought in, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, close to 15 transfers. And we were going through it on Gators Breakdown Plus the other day. We expect 13 of them to have impacts this year for Florida. Can Cormani McClain, the transfer from Colorado, can he come in, the 5-star, who in a lot of ways probably thought should have been a Gator to begin with as well, kind of like Grayson Howard a couple of cycles ago. He comes in. Can he have an instant impact? Florida doesn't need him to have an instant impact this year, but if he can whittle his way and to get starting reps or get a whole lot of reps, he earned it, because he had to go out there and beat a Devin Moore for some reps. He had to go beat a Jason Marshall for some reps. So if he's out there making impact, he went out there and earned it. Florida really went heavy in the transfer portal, Mark, and most of those guys should be contributors, not guys that need to develop down the road.
Cormani McClain, there's no doubt about the talent, number 1 rated cornerback coming out of high school. There was a lot of drama surrounding his recruitment with Miami and others at the time. Then he goes out to Colorado. And Deion Sanders didn't have the best things to say about him. It was probably 2/3 of the way through the season. Deion was asked, okay, why is he not on the field, considering look at your defense and look at this talent? Basically said, late to meetings, doesn't show up for meetings, not prepared, doesn't know the defense. Just considering what's been whether it's been substantiated or not concerning Cormani McClain, any concerns that he's going to, run the straight and narrow and be able to show up and work and be the player that he should be able to be.
Well, Mark, it was a pretty low risk move for Florida. What the layout of this and how it played out was a complete understanding of what he needed, what he's looking for, and what Florida was looking for. Mark, he doesn't even have a scholarship for Florida right now. He got a preferred walk-on status. So it doesn't hurt Florida numbers-wise right now. Now, if he goes on to earn a scholarship, just fine. And I know people will say, here, well, he can mess the locker room up. We've seen that, and because of those reports. And it's just like, well, if it takes one player to mess your locker room culture up, Mark, was your locker room culture all that strong to begin with? I think that's the way I was looking at it. I think it's a low-risk move for Florida. If he turned out to be the 5-star player that he was rated, big move for Florida. But there was an understanding from both sides of what they were looking for. And then, certain parameters he has to meet to get on the field, to be a part of this team. So far, so good from what I've heard the last few weeks that he's been on campus. But, of course, we know summer's got to go, and he's got to be a part of this team in the season. But if it doesn't work out, no harm, no foul for Florida, especially as far as numbers go.
For a 5-win football team, you would think that there would be opportunities for true freshmen to come in, and then also based on your intel of who's impressed early, who would be the possible freshman that could step in and do something.
Well, we'll go to defense, and I know I mentioned linebacker with Pup Howard, but Miles Graham did go through a little bit of spring practice before he suffered a back injury, had surgery. He should be on the field for fall camp, but one of the best linebackers in the country, Mark, certainly was getting the feels already of being an instant impact as a true freshman. Aaron Childs just come on campus as well, another top linebacker in the country. So Florida's got two linebackers at two freshman linebackers at that spot that I do think can have an impact. If you go back to the spring game, Jaden Ball was electric as a running back in the spring game, Mark. Big bodied, but doesn't move like it moves like he's much smaller than about the 230 he is, making guys miss, putting his foot in the ground, a little shimmy and getting upfield. And also Tank Hawkins at wide receiver, one of the fastest players on this Florida team at the receiver spot. I mentioned receiver earlier, but with his speed, may be able to find a way to get on the field. So about 4 of them out there, Mark, I'd probably come off with the top of my head that I think can make an impact this year for Florida.